to welcome you as the campaign manager for Oklahomans for Food, Farm, and Family for our press release event for the legal analysis prepared for and by the Conservation Coalition of Oklahoma, which is a member of the Oklahomans for Food, Farm, and Family umbrella effort. We've got a lot of wonderful people here today who are very concerned about State Question 777 and its impact upon Oklahoma. As you'll see here, these are all local organizations, all individuals of all walks of life, from farmers to clergymen, who represent very different aspects of Oklahoma culture. And we all recognize the impact that 777 has on our lives and potentially on our state of Oklahoma. First, we'll have to introduce everyone here. Ron Suttles, who's the chairman of the Conservation Coalition of Oklahoma. Krystina Phillips, who's a board member for the Conservation Coalition of Oklahoma, that is also an attorney who prepared the legal briefing that we have for release today. Greg Mann, with Trout Unlimited, is right back here. Trout Unlimited is a member of Conservation Coalition of Oklahoma as well. Carolyn Stager is with the Oklahoma Municipal League. The Municipal League is also part of the Oklahomans for Food, Farm, and Family umbrella effort. We also have Elizabeth Warner, who is a part of the Edmond City Council for Ward 2. The Edmond City Council just recently, last week, adopted a resolution in opposition to State Question 777. So we're very proud and appreciative of their efforts and hope to see those replicated across the state. Steve Hill, who's with Focus Farms, he should be here shortly, but he's not here quite yet. He's a farmer located in Edmond as well. Russ Johnson, who's the chef and owner of Ludivine, R&J Lounge, and two new concepts in Edmond is right here. He's also a longtime member of the Oklahoma Farm and Food Alliance. Don Faulkner, who's a board member for the Oklahomans for Responsible Water Policy, standing behind us here, as well as Russell Dowdy, who is the coordinator for Oklahomans for Responsible Water Policy. Former State Senator Paul Muegge is here as well as the co-chairman of the Oklahoma Stewardship Council. And then we have Jim Stovall, who's with the Oklahoma Conference of Churches. And we also have some representatives from the Kirkpatrick Foundation here as well, Louisa McKeon and Brian Jones, who have been instrumental in providing third-party research on this issue and educating folks across Oklahoma. So we thank you all for being here, and thank you for your support. I'm going to turn it over here to Ron Suttles, who will explain the Conservation Coalition of Oklahoma and its efforts at defeating State Question 777. So thank you, Ron.
Thanks, Bud. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Conservation Coalition of Oklahoma, we're an alliance of organizations created to connect conservation groups, communities of faith, youth service organizations, hunters, anglers, farmers, and businessmen across Oklahoma to work together on conservation issues that are important to Oklahoma. CCO is a table around which groups interested in conservation issues can join together to develop understanding, develop partnerships, and speak with a collective voice on conservation issues. We're a 501c4 organization, which allows us to work with legislators and represent conservation interests at the Capitol. Our soon-to-be 501c3 foundation will allow us to bring in additional partners and expand our capabilities. We're also a new affiliate of the National Wildlife Federation, just happened in the last few months. We interact with a wide range of organizations, and there are handouts available with additional information about our organization, the CCO, as well as some of the other organizations and some of the organizations that we connect with. You can also go to our website, which is oklahomaconservation.org, for more information about the CCO and in particular about State Question 777. Which brings us to why we're here today. State Question 777 is on the November ballot, and Oklahomans need to know what it means before they cast their vote. We were compelled to get involved in the debate over this state question when it became clear that Oklahomans weren't being given all the information they need about this proposed change to Oklahoma's Constitution. When you look at the full range of groups that are expressing concern and doubt about State Question 777. The Conservation Coalition of Oklahoma appreciates their contributions to our efforts. We appreciate and understand the importance of agriculture in our state, and importantly, just because you're opposed to State Question 777 doesn't change that. Agricultural lands are key to sound conservation. Our farmers and ranchers are important partners in keeping Oklahoma's natural resources healthy. That said, Oklahomans need to understand that this state question is a big deal, and here's why. First, the idea for State Question 777 didn't originate in Oklahoma. It's part of a national push by corporate agricultural interests shopping this concept to several states in hopes of limiting or eliminating state oversight of their industry. The version we ended up with places in the Oklahoma Bill of Rights agriculture as a protected industry. No other industry in Oklahoma, not oil and gas, not manufacturing, not the financial industry, nobody has that kind of protection. Once you put it in the Constitution, legislators, city councils and state agencies become powerless. It permanently ties the hands of the Oklahoma legislature in the event that agricultural practices cause harm to people or property. It forces federal oversight by hamstringing Oklahoma's ability to regulate this industry, and practically ensures that federal agencies like the EPA will have to step in to do it. Oklahoma's farming and ranching industry already has a statutory right to operate pursuant to Oklahoma statutes. It's critical to note, however, that under this statute they must still answer to the Oklahoma legislature, and that is the key to this state question. Proponents of this state question want it in the Constitution because the Constitution trumps future statutes. The State Question 777 does provide for grandfathering some, but not all, in existing laws. But even those laws can lose their grandfather standing and be changed or eliminated under certain conditions. We believe that State Question 777 will hurt family farms because of corporate industrial agriculture's ability to exploit this constitutional amendment in the name of agricultural technology. State Question 777 also opens the door for large agriculture operations to impact waters in ways outlined in the legal brief Krystina is going to be talking to you about. I appreciate your time today, and vote no on 777.
Thanks, Ron. We'll now turn it over to Krystina Phillips, who will provide a detailed explanation of the legal analysis that she prepared here. So, without further ado, we'll also have Q&A sessions for the media immediately after her presentation, because she's going to have to leave us and head back to Eastern Oklahoma. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, guys. As Bud mentioned, my name is Krystina Phillips. I'm a partner at the Indian and Environmental Law Group, which, as the name suggests, we practice primarily in the areas of Indian law and environmental law. Specifically, my practice is comprised primarily of environmental law. A little bit about myself. I was quite literally raised in a barn. My dad was an ag teacher. I spent lots of time raising animals, showing animals from the time I was 4 years old until I graduated at age 18. Was very involved in agriculture, did speeches, judging contests, all of those things. I was very proud to be awarded the state FFA degree, as well as the American Farmer degree. And I went on to continue my career in agriculture, if you will, at the Oklahoma State University, graduating with a Bachelor's of Science in Agribusiness. I say this because I want to impress upon you the impact that agriculture has had on my life. Agriculture has molded me into the person I am today, and and I certainly appreciate agriculture and all of the farmers and ranchers in our state. Nonetheless, as Bud mentioned, you can be for agriculture, yet oppose State Question 777. A few months ago, I was approached by representatives of the Conservation Coalition of Oklahoma, as well as the National Wildlife Federation, about concerns those entities had related to State Question 777. Particularly, these entities wanted to know whether their concerns had any legal justification. I can tell you today, after spending much time researching those concerns and other issues, that there are many issues that are legally justified to be concerned about. Those issues are detailed in a brief that I've prepared for the Conservation Coalition and the National Wildlife Federation. Quickly though, I would like to highlight just a few of those issues for you. The first is the potential for State Question 777 to put the state of Oklahoma at odds with federal law. The Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, is responsible for implementing and enforcing a number of federal statutes, such as the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. As part of those acts, they have the authority to delegate the enforcement responsibility to the states, and more specifically to state agencies. Here in Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food and Forestry, and the Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality have been designated certain enforcement authority. However, that enforcement authority comes with a qualification, if you will. The state and the state agencies must maintain the minimum federal regulations as set forth by the EPA. In other words, states are free to pass laws that are more stringent than that set by the EPA, but they must maintain that federal floor of regulation in order to continue to implement and enforce those laws. Otherwise, the EPA can revoke that delegation of authority and take over enforcement. What that means for Oklahoma is that State Question 777 in many respects is a gigantic invitation to the federal government to come into the state and regulate Oklahoma entities. As Oklahomans, I think it's widely held that we value local control and local input. And it seems to me that State Question 777 is in direct contradiction to these Oklahoma values and goals. Some other concerns, as I was reviewing and analyzing this, is the vague and ambiguous language of State Question 777, as well as the legal standard, the compelling state interest language as laid out in State Question 777. A compelling state interest is a legal term of art that requires a strict scrutiny under the Constitution. In layman's terms, most regulations that are challenged and receive strict scrutiny analysis fail. In other words, any regulation passed by our legislature that somehow infringes upon the right to agricultural operations or the right to farm and ranch in Oklahoma would be met with strict scrutiny and would more than likely fail unless a very compelling state interest could be identified and established. Lastly, the last issue I'd like to address with you is one that I think we can all identify with, and that's our pocketbooks. So State Question 777 has the potential to affect my pocketbook and your pocketbook as Oklahoma citizens. Municipalities and public water suppliers are required by law to treat water to certain standards before distributing it to their consumers. Logically, it makes sense that the cleaner the water is at the beginning, the less treatment is needed by the municipal water suppliers, and the cheaper it is for those municipalities and other water suppliers to distribute it to the consumer. Conversely, the more polluted and contaminated the water, the higher the cost of treatment, and in some cases, even new water treatment plants could be necessary to treat the amount of contamination and pollution, which only increases costs both to the water suppliers and ultimately to the consumers. In conclusion, State Question 777 has many far-reaching impacts, and I think that it deserves some intelligent discussion among all Oklahomans. This is something that we should not rush into should consider very carefully. With that, I will entertain any questions that you have for me, and then turn it back over to Bud.
You mentioned here that it creates impermissible conflicts with constitutional private property protections. Would you kind of explain that?
Sure, I'll try to do so as quickly and concisely as I can. So in the Constitution, also in the Bill of Rights, there is an article, a clause that guarantees your right to property and that someone won't take your property without your permission. There's a similar statute for public takings, and we all know that as the eminent domain, but this is for a private taking of private property. So you can have the very real situation where you have a private property owner downstream who owns property that a creek runs through. And you could have an agricultural operation upstream of that that contaminates or pollutes the water. And that could be considered a takings of private property by a private entity without permission. And so in that instance, you would have two clauses in the Bill of Rights that contradict each other and that seem to support each's causes of action. And it's a real legal conundrum, if you will. Any other questions? Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate having the opportunity to talk to you all. I hope you have a wonderful day. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Scott.
Thank you. Members of the media have been prepared or provided with a copy of the analysis in their media folder. It'll also be made available electronically, so we'll send that out. You can find it on our website, okfoodfarmfamily.com, or at okresponsibleag.com.org.gov, any of those endings, ending suffixes. So you guys have plenty of opportunity to review that if you haven't already. We did provide it to the media in anticipation of this event. So we thank Krystina for all the diligent work that she conducted in this and preparing that analysis. It really hammers home the issues we have with State Question 777. This is such a broad-reaching proposal that's really unchecked, and it's unparalleled in Oklahoma history. There's never been an attempt to grant constitutional privileges, to have a privileged class to an industry in Oklahoma. Those rights are usually reserved for people of sort of specific gender or race or disabilities. These are something that protect individuals rather than entire industries and practices. So it's very dangerous to start waving this language around and enshrining it in our sacred document, the Oklahoma Constitution. I'm going to speak briefly as the director of the Oklahoma Farm and Food Alliance, in which capacity I've served for the past 5 years. We represent over 400 local farmers, ranchers, restaurants, distributors, grocers across the state of Oklahoma that are all sizes. Some of them are backyard gardeners, some of them have 100-acre properties. Very few of them are large-scale industrial operators, but they're all committed to the local food system in Oklahoma. We view State Question 777 as a continued and blatant threat to our food transparency in Oklahoma. We all should have the right to know what goes into our food, to say how our food is raised, and to determine in particular the quality of our water that we drink as well. Under 777, our hands would be tied on all those fronts. So it's critically important to us at the Farm and Food Alliance to maintain that food transparency and the ability of our elected officials and our agency folks to regulate this industry. I'm going to turn it over to Russ Johnson really quick, who's with the Oklahoma Farm and Food Alliance, to make a brief statement on behalf of the restaurateurs and chefs.
Thank you. Yeah, my statement will be brief and sort of general, but as Bud said, I am a chef and restaurateur of a farm-to-table restaurant, as well as some other concepts in the works. But you know, so much time is spent, you know, and as Krystina mentioned, I think it's very possible to be pro-agriculture and be against this proposition, and that you know, so much time is spent on our part looking for, you know, searching out food products that are produced in a certain way. You know, we are, you know, can be familiar with the practices involved in producing, whether it's livestock or crops, sorts of chemicals that go on to them, the way things are fed, the way things are raised, the way animals are processed, you know, etc. And with, and as a restaurateur, I also have a clientele that cares a lot about these things. I think more and more the general public does. And so it's just very concerning that the language of this proposition is so broad as to make it virtually impossible to regulate in any way any of these practices that could be construed by really any individual to fall under the very broad veil of either livestock procedure, ranching practices, or agricultural technology, no matter how inhumane or detrimental to the environment they may be. That's really the general gist of my position. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Russ.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. Next, we'll turn it over to Carolyn Stager, who is the Executive Director of the Oklahoma Municipal League. She'll give a brief overview of OML and their position on 777.
Thank you very much, Bud, and thank you all for being here. I think I'm going to just get up and say ditto. I think Mr. Suttles and Ms. Phillips actually did a wonderful job of their big overview in talking about local control. And representing 460 municipalities throughout this state, I think our cities and towns are very concerned with being able to protect the health and safety and welfare of their citizens. And I think many of the issues regarding land zoning and use, and particularly as it relates to water and all of the issues that we've been talking about today. I know an example that our mayor out in Choctaw, Randy Ross, uses in this is I have a big subdivision here that's divided into 5-acre lots. So I'm coming in and spending $1 million and building my dream home, and then my next door neighbor decides that they're going to set up some kind of small farming operation, and guess what? The municipality would have no ability to regulate any of that under this proposition. So I think the unknowns are way, way too many and really very scary. And so again, very much thank everybody that's here representing. I think when you look at the diverse group that is represented here today, you can see there are many, many issues, and you can just kind of pick and choose which one you think is the most onerous for you. But thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Carolyn. Next, I'd like to introduce Don Faulkner, who's a member of the board of directors for Oklahoma's Responsible Water Policy out of Tallahena, Oklahoma. So we have our southeastern representative now.
Thank you so much for having the opportunity to be here today. As Ron said, I'm Don Faulkner from the town of Tallahena, and I'm a member of the board of the Oklahomans for Responsible Water Policy. We were founded in 2010 as a result of the state of Oklahoma and Oklahoma Water Resources Board trying to sell Sardis Lake in southeastern Oklahoma. And our group said, wait a minute, we can't do this. We need to look at this and make sure that the economy in southeastern Oklahoma is not adversely affected to benefit another economy somewhere else. And so we got busy and started growing our organization. Today we have 15,000 members in Oklahomans for Responsible Water Policy. We represent every county in the state of Oklahoma. And some of y'all may think we're just a southeastern Oklahoma group, but our largest membership county in our organization is Oklahoma County. They make up the largest county as far as membership in our organization. And I'd like to point out that we have three things that concern us about State Question 777. The first one is, like Krystina said, and I won't dwell on it too much, is the right to employ agricultural technology. It doesn't say good technology or generally accepted technology. It just says agricultural technology. And we all know by looking at our history what some of the agricultural technology has done to the environment in our country. We looked at Oklahoma. What did the Dust Bowl do to us? And that was created partly because of poor agricultural practices. We know what DDT did to us. It almost wiped out the bald eagle. But thank goodness we have regulations to stop DDT, and yeah, we have bald eagles that we can look at and marvel at. We also look at, in recent years, the algae bloom in our lakes and rivers. And we know that's partially caused by agricultural runoff. Now, does that say we're against agriculture? No. We just say let's make sure that those practices are good and sound agricultural practices. The second thing that Krystina brought up is the compelling state interest. And we also look at that and says, okay, what is this compelling state interest? And we're concerned, like Krystina is, about the fact that when you take the state out of this equation, who comes in? The courts and the federal government. And I think that people in Oklahoma would much rather have the state of Oklahoma working with our agricultural industry, creating good, sound agricultural policy rather than letting the courts and the federal government come in and establish those policies. We think it's wiser for the local people in Oklahoma to work together to create these policies. Since the beginning of ORWP, our main goal has been to make sure that sound science is utilized before any water policy is ever established. And what we're worried about in the state of Oklahoma, only one aquifer has been comprehensively studied to the point that we can determine the sustainable annual yield of that aquifer. And that's the Arbuckle-Simpson aquifer. And before, the Water Resources Board said that this particular aquifer could produce approximately 2 acre-feet of water. And now, when they did the study, it's 0.2 acre-feet of water. So before we did this comprehensive study, we thought we could have a lot more water than we actually have. So what concerns us is that if we pass this law, how are we going to be able to do our science in order to regulate the use of water to make sure that we have sustainable water for future generations of Oklahomans? There's only 2 states west of the Mississippi that doesn't have a complete inflow study of their streams and rivers. And guess which one of them we involved? We're not the 48, or we're one of the 2 that haven't done our in-stream flow studies. So we're saying, people, let's back up a minute and not get this cart ahead of this horse. We have to make sure that we know exactly what we're doing with water before we do anything. And what we've got is a bill here, or a state law that we're asked to vote on, that, forgive me for saying it this way, but if you thought Nancy Pelosi was wrong when she said just pass the bill and read it later, you're going to say 777 is wrong. Because we're being asked to pass this thing without knowing exactly what it means. Nobody can tell you what compelling state interest is and what agricultural practices are involved in this bill. So until we know exactly what this bill includes, this law includes, we need to vote no. Because we'll wake up down the road and say, what have we done? And then it'll be too late. The farm bill, that's another concern we have in our organization. And I'll bring that out in the room here today. Farm Bureau is one of our biggest, I'm going to say enemies when it comes to protecting water. In their last year annual meeting, they voted to allow or agree to out-of-sale of Oklahoma water, out-of-state sale of Oklahoma water. Never before have they come up and said that. They also took out their language of opposition to eminent domain when it comes to building dams, pipelines, and so forth. And they also put in this particular annual policy that the cities, the towns, and states cannot tax any infrastructure used to move water. So who's one of the biggest backers of State Question 777? Oklahoma Farm Bureau and Tom Buchanan. So over the years, they've been trying to take our water, and our group is concerned that all this is a backdoor way of moving water from one part of our state to the other. As I said before, we cannot build up the economy in one part of the state while destroying it in another part of the state. I believe Oklahoma is a great state. I grew up in this state, I went to school in this state, and I reside in this state. And to me, it's one of the best states in the country. And I say, as an Oklahoman, we make this ship rise together. We don't raise one part of it up and destroy the other. So I'm going to sit here with one last thing. I'm going to quote Tom Buchanan. He came to a recent meeting we had in Oklahoma's Responsible Water Policy. And he said, people, all I'm trying to do is protect a way of life. And I said, Mr. Buchanan, I'm glad you said that. Does that tell me you agree with me and Oklahoma's Responsible Water Policy? Because that's what we're trying to do, is protect a way of life. Water is used in many industries, not just agriculture. And I looked up on Google, as everybody famously does. Did you know that I can survive as much as 8 weeks without food if I have water? I can only survive 3 to 5 days without water. So if we're saying what needs to be constitutionally protected, it's not agriculture, it's water. And I'm saying here tonight, again, help us all protect the way of life of the 98% of people that's not included in this bill, not just the 2%. Thank you.
Pretty powerful commentary. So now has a different perspective on this from the Oklahoma Conference of Churches.
Thank you. So, the Oklahoma Conference of Churches is a coalition of all of the major Christian denominations in the state of Oklahoma, all of the mainline Protestant denominations, as well as the Catholic Church is very supportive. For what it's worth, the Oklahoma Conference of Churches has a long history of involvement. I got to know Paul here many years ago when the Oklahoma Conference of Churches had a farm crisis program. People in the faith community were deeply concerned about what was happening to farms, especially small family farms throughout the state. We had a farm crisis hotline that was an attempt to prevent farmers from taking their own lives in the face of extreme threat to their farming operations. So one point here is that the Conference of Churches recognizes the value of family farms and the importance of our agricultural community. So don't be deceived in thinking that 777 is pro-farmer or pro-agriculture. I think that's a mistake. I think it's a shell game. It's an attempt to mislead by calling it protecting agriculture or right to farm. The faith community is very clear that when it comes to our land, our air, the water we drink, the air that we breathe, that we are all in it together. It's not appropriate any longer to say that your end of the ship is sinking. That's folly. And so it doesn't make sense that we would favor one industry over other industries. All of this, all of our natural resources are a sacred gift of God. And we do not believe that this state question would put us any closer to treating it as a sacred resource that it is. As far as I can tell, 777 would rob the state of its legitimate ability to protect these valuable resources. As far as I can tell, 777 is a Trojan horse which opens the door to large corporate interests. So in no way is it pro-farmer or anything of the sort. As a community, as a state, as Oklahomans, we need to have the ability, the capacity to act, to protect these natural resources, to respond to new problems, new threats to our land, our water, our wildlife, our air, and our food. And my belief is that State Question 77 robs us of that opportunity to take legitimate action and to protect these incredibly important natural resources that cannot be replaced. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Now I'd like to turn to the true champion of Oklahoma's farmers and ranchers here in Oklahoma. Former State Senator Paul Muegge is not only a farmer, he's been a policymaker who has really put his actions where his words were. He has stood up for our natural resources, and he stood up for our producers. So I want to turn it over to some words of wisdom from former Senator. Thank you.
There's some people I still require that they use the title. They're at OSU. And they don't like it. It's really gratifying to be a part of a coalition of people in Oklahoma, friends and longtime acquaintances. I just can't believe this lineup here, the people that I got to work with while I was in the legislature. I spent 12 years there. By the way, I was a co-author of DEQ. There's an interesting thing about that. Did you ever stop to think why the animal waste regulations are in the Department of Agriculture? Well, we couldn't have got it passed if it hadn't been in the DEQ. That's some of the inside things that we've had to deal with in agriculture for a number of years. And at that time, most of the farm organizations were were opposed to us establishing a Department of Environmental Quality in the state of Oklahoma. And why were we doing it? We wanted primacy from the federal government so we could chart our own destiny. A great idea, and it's been a great piece of public policy. 777 is the biggest scam since Enron. Yep, I know about Enron. I studied that issue. I'm amazed that we have a past history for not talking about things. And by the way, right to farm was one of those issues. This came up a long time ago, but it just laid there. And I had another offshoot of it that I had to deal with called the self-environmental audit legislation for industry, which, by the way, provided a privileged immunity. Well, that's what 77 is. It's a privileged immunity. Folks, I farmed all my life. That's not the problem. That's not the issue. I completed my 69th wheat harvest here about a month ago. I'm going to be 80 years old in September. So I've seen a lot of the panorama of what's going on in agriculture. And I'll guarantee you, it hasn't all been pretty. In fact, I always harken back to a quote by Henry Kissinger. I don't know whether you all realize, but he was involved with the Rockefeller Foundation, who was out trying to feed the world. And Henry Kissinger made the comment, you can control nations with oil. You can control people with food. And so that's why we have this propaganda that just keeps coming out. Well, we're going to feed the world. Yep, Monsanto, Cargill, ADM. I've heard those comments from them. That's not anything new. 777, as I looked at it while I was going through the legislature, was one of those solutions, searching for a problem. How many issues have we witnessed in the last 2 or 3 years in our state legislature? And it hadn't gotten us anyplace. Distortions of these new technologies, production technologies, there's so much unfairness in the marketplace. You see the integrated systems do away with competition in the marketplace. Just stop to think about it. Chickenization, that's what we call it. It's a complete lockup. And what does it do? It shifts all of the inherent risk in food production down to the lowest level. This is an economic issue. And that's something that I think we in agriculture just can't talk about. And we're going to need to do that. Due to the growing influence of large agribusiness concerns, falling crop prices, and that's today, and failed agriculture policies of the past in rural America has cost us somewhere between 700 and 1 million family farms. We've got some good information that Brian has put together for more recent information. Yes, these were men and women who embraced the American dream, who had done everything that we were supposed to do to be successful, were left with nothing. Norman Rockwell's vision of America is dead. No, I don't believe that. I see a much brighter future for all of us because we're in this together. But I do want to leave you with a little quote that I have because I think it's so appropriate for today, what we're living through beyond the 777 issue. On a sweltering summer day, an old man went down into a cool cellar for some relief. The moment he entered, however, he was blinded by the darkness. "Don't worry," said another man in the cellar. "It is natural that when you go from light to darkness, you are unable to see. Soon enough, though, your eyes will grow accustomed to it, and you will hardly notice it is dark." The man replied, "My dear friend, first man turned to him and said, "Leave him." That is exactly what I'm afraid of. This is probably one of the most critical issues that I've ever participated with in production agriculture in the state of Oklahoma. And it's time to call it what it is. It's a corporate scam on the part of agribusiness to protect themselves so they won't get sued someday for screwing up the environment. Thank you.
As Senator Muegge said, a solution looking for a problem. That's what we have here with State Question 777. The proponents of this legislation, they'll tell you that the only people that are fighting this are out-of-state animal rights and environmental activists. I think if you look behind us today, you see people of all walks of life. Our voices count in this matter. We should be heard when it comes to water quality, when it comes to food transparency, when it comes to constitutional protections. So I want to thank all of our coalition members here, and then I'd like to give the Executive Director of the Kirkpatrick Foundation, Louisa McCune, an opportunity to make a few comments. They have an incredible amount of resources on this issue that you can find at the website that we've relied on to develop some talking points, but I'd like to give them the opportunity to address the groundswell.
Just a couple things to say that this is way better than being in Cleveland at the Republican National Convention. So this is what I would call collective intelligence. So my hats off to this excellent panel. Speaking about the issue, Brian and I are the Kirkpatrick Foundation. We are in the nonpartisan lane. We can't take a vote no or a vote yes position, but we can do nonpartisan analysis. That's when we go deep and look at the issues and try to provide substantive information about State Question 777, which affects the areas that we make grants. And we've been around since 1955. We're starting our 7th decade. And I thank you for including us today. So happy to be here.
Thank you. So again, members of the media, you'll have in your packet the copies of the brief, contact information for the folks who are present today if you'd like to do any follow-ups. This is being live streamed, so it'll be available digitally as well. You'll be able to find it on our website, okfoodfarmfamily.com, as well as at okconservation.
OKResponsibleAg.com.
All right. Exactly. We've got a few, there's like 5 websites that we have, so just check it out. Check out No on 777 as well. There's a lot of wonderful partners here. We're honored to be working with so many talented people who are fighting this critical issue. So thank you very much, and vote no on 777.